Thank you very much. Good morning. It's an honor being here today, and it's great to hear that talks from Peter and Jennifer. And you'll see some repetition, and maybe some of you have seen uh, this presentation many times, so I apologize. So maybe you can help me with the presentation. So I'm going to talk about some of the restoration efforts, provide a little bit of the background also, and and just for the geographic context, we're already uh, pretty well located now, but this is the Delta region, and just to point out, well, this is Yuma, the confluence of the Gila and the Colorado, Salton Sea, the Pacific. You can see that we're in a very dry and arid region. Actually, this is the one of the most arid regions, the Grande and the Pinacate. Uh, very dry. So the water here is really important. You can see also the connection with the upper Gulf. Um, as Peter mentioned, this used to be one of the most important areas for wildlife in the whole continent, over 400,000 hectares, and all of the river water getting into the Gulf of California. So the river extended 65 kilometers, about 50 miles into the sea, created an estuary of about 500,000 hectares. It was a huge area of exchange of fresh and salt water. And of course, that has changed with the dams, the diversions, but also agricultural expansion in Mexico. And this is the hydrograph, from the beginning of the 1900s to the 2000. And you can see how, well, there was a lot of water getting into the delta with a lot of variation. Then there was the construction of the dams, and usually the river just carries the amount that Mexico requests because of the treaty allocation. But as we hear before, there were some excess flows during the 80s and the 90s, and that caused that natural regeneration of the system that sparked all of that interest for restoration. And one of the very valuable things about the delta is not only that we have riparian or that we have marsh, but really that we have this diversity of habitat types in just one region. So we have the riparian corridor uh, from Morelos Dam downstream that Jennifer was talking about. But then we have also the Cienega Santa Clara, which is a very large marsh. It's about 14,000 acres of cattail and open water, but then also another 20,000 acres or more of mudflats that um, receive some tidal influence. Then we also have the Hardy River that is maintained by agricultural drainage and treated effluent from wastewater plants. So it's another marsh area, very important. And then these tidal mudflats, really, really cool for shorebirds. And then, of course, the marine part. So having this interaction here really makes it really interesting for wildlife, especially for birds. And so we have about 380 bird species in the delta, because of this diversity, marine birds and land birds and riparian birds. And every winter we have about 200,000 migratory water birds in this area. So it's still a very important place. And so it has been established a biosphere reserve. It's a natural protected area in Mexico. It's a federal biosphere reserve. And also we have two designations of Ramsar sites, wetlands of international importance in the Delta. And it's a priority wetlands, and priority wetland in North America, within the North American Water Bird Conservation Plan. And this is a Yuma Clapper Ridgeway rail now, but I still like to call them clapper rails. It's an endangered bird protected in Mexico and the U.S., and about 75% of the total population of the Yuma clapper rails are in the Colorado River Delta, especially in the Cienega. So we have talked about this effort, the planning, the conservation priorities report that really set up the tone for the collaboration. But it provides us with the basis, on a consensus of what we want to restore in the Delta. And having this effort of science and planning and consensus building is really important as a basis to move forward. And then we, in addition to identifying what can be restored, what Francisco Zamora from Sonora Institute calls the map of the possible for the Delta, we have also been working, okay, what are the water needs, for if we want to protect those areas. And this has been an evolving process as we learn more, and also as conditions change. We're in a dynamic system. Groundwater conditions go up and down, and we need to take that into account. And overall, there are many components in this strategy. There are many organizations, and I think that has been really important. There is not only restoration on the ground, or not only policy, but a series of components interacting together. On the one hand, research and planning that we talk about, that then fits and go back in a loop in all of this process. Outreach and community involvement has been really key. Binational negotiations, public policy, both in the US and Mexico, but also at the local level with local agencies and institutions and the irrigation district. This component of securing water for the environment through different mechanisms, policy is one of them, water acquisitions through the trust is another one, but also working with wastewater treatment plants in securing effluent for environment when the conditions are good enough. And then the protection of key sites, when we're restoring sites, we want to make sure that they are protected in the long term. And then, of course, restoration. And as Jennifer was mentioning, no, it's the partnership that help us keep going, and it's a lot of organizations working together from the U.S. and Mexico. And just want to talk a little bit more about the water allocation. No, when we started this, we knew that well, the river is over allocated, that it was not really feasible to go with the U.S. and Mexican governments and say, we want water for the river, because they don't have any water. No, they have given all the water to different uses in both countries. So we knew that we needed new strategies and tools. And one of them is the water trust, no? What we call voluntary and market-based strategies, acquisition of water rights in the Mexicali Valley. So Jennifer mentioned, there was already a very dynamic market in the Mexicali Valley, farmers exchanging water rights, but also the cities participating. So with some legal and economic research, we figured out that we could also be part of that market and still, instead of the water going to the cities, recover some of the water and keep it for environment. So we created this water trust for the restoration of the Colorado River Delta as a partnership of Environmental Defense Funds, on an Institute Pro Natura, and then recently the Nature Conservancy also. And so this is the floodplain of the river. And floodplains in Mexico are federal lands managed by our National Water Commission, but then you can get a concession of the federal land for a particular purpose. So we have been working with the National Water Commission to get concessions on federal land for the restoration project. So we have now about 1,500 acres of concessions where we're implementing restoration. And that's where we land our water rights that we acquire through the water trust, so we can send the water directly to those sites. Basically, what it works is a particular field in the valley has its water right, but that water right can be separated from the land, so then you can move it around within the valley so we can send it to the river. And then we have been working a lot with restoration design to implement. So planning, well, you probably know very well, is essential to successful restoration. And later today, Karen Schlatter and I think also Matt Grabo will present more specifically about the restoration project. So you should check those presentations. And this is a site called Laguna Grande that Sonora Institute is taking the lead. And this is just to show that the vision, this is about 2,000 acres of projects. So we start with a restoration vision, and then we implement in the ground. And then also on the limit zone, so what we call Reach 1, we're also implementing a project in Miguel Alemán. So one side of the river is in Arizona and the other side is in Baja California. So we have a joint restoration concept. This is the international boundary and the river. So in Arizona, Fred Phillips Consulting and the Yuma Crossing National Heritage Area have been implementing this project in Hunter's Hole. And just across the river, we're implementing this project in Miguel Alemán. And just a quick summary of what restoration entails in Mexico. I think it's very similar in the US, although we use more labor because we want to link these projects with the community and create jobs for the community. So it starts, of course, with the selection of sites and planning and having a baseline, but then the first step is clearing salt cedar, and we use a lot of labor for this. And then, of course, the contouring of land, leveling, bringing irrigation to the site. In Mexico, we don't have commercial nurseries for providing us with the plants, so we have 3 nurseries now. So we have to produce all of our cottonwoods, willows, and mesquite. But that also creates jobs for the community. And then, of course, the planting part. No? And this also creates great opportunities for volunteers and environmental education. With the post-flow there was a lot of interest and momentum. So we have been using that momentum to and that interest to bring volunteers and involve them in planting and also in part of the restoration projects. And just a picture to show the results. These restoration projects are really taking off. They are working really nice, and I guess the soils are right, the plants are right, we have the water, so things are working really neat. So in combination of that particular restoration sites, and we have that the pulse flow, no, that created this effect over the whole floodplain. So it's this combination of effects. I think it's really changing things, no, and having a riverbank on a larger scale is helping in a wonderful way. That overbank flooding, helping those existing trees to get more vigorous, but also the undergrowth story has been really good, and also new recruitment is coming up of new cohorts of cottonwoods and willows. And Jennifer was talking about this, know how the greening up, the work from Dr. Glenn and Pam Nagler from USGS and Glenn from the University of Arizona have shown that overall we have a 43% increase, no, in the biomass in the flooded area and 23% in the riparian zone. This is really important. No, even a particular site was not inundated, still there was significant greening up, no, and Jennifer was mentioning that connection with the groundwater. And so what has been the effect on the birds? This is still very preliminary analysis, but just comparing the trend and also the 2013 with 2014, we saw an increase of 43% in bird diversity, no? And this trend that we're seeing is that in 2002, we started on very wet conditions after about 4 years of flooding in the delta. At that time, there was about 15% of overall cover of cottonwood and willow. Then we had the drought. Conditions have been deteriorating. Now we are less than 1% of cottonwood willow cover overall. But it's really important to notice how the trend has changed. And also in the vegetation index, no, in the greening up, there was a significant downward trend, and the pulse flow started to change that trend. So I think that's very significant how we're starting to change that trend, and improving conditions start to continuing a deterioration. No? And so where do we saw some of the bird population changes, or which birds are increasing? Again, this is still preliminary. We're working on a more detailed report, but we saw comparing 2014, just during a little bit after the pulse flow, with 2013, we saw a significant increase in water and riparian birds, just smaller, an increase in 1,400%, and the snowy egrets also a lot of increase, no? But you can see, you know, common yellow throats, curlews, great egrets increasing, no, marsh wrens, haverstowis. And then we saw a decrease of generalists and birds related to agricultural fields or birds related to disturbance, no? So we still need to figure out what's happening at the landscape and what's happening adjacent agricultural lands, but what we're seeing these trends already. And so in terms of riparian restoration projects, we're concentrating right now in 3 areas in the Delta. One, I mentioned Miguel Alemán in the riparian zone, and then 2 in Reach 4 in the lower areas, in what we call Laguna Grande and the Sila site. And it's cottonwood, willow, mesquite. We're dedicating the water rights, and right now we are about 300 acres. And in these particular sites, we're also monitoring vegetation changes and how the birds change in these areas. And just looking at the different strata in these restoration sites, the black bars are the restoration sites, and the gray ones are just the overall floodplain. And we see that, well, of course, we have more trees, a little bit more shrubs, more water, and much less bare soil. And also we have more willows and cottonwood and mesquites, less salt cedar. And the birds are responding, of course. No? We have more abundance, more richness of species per point, and also more diversity of birds. And for me, what's more important is that tracking certain species that are of conservation interest or of conservation concern, their average abundance per point was 2.7 7 times higher at restoration sites, no, with very significant statistically. Average towhees, one of them, birdings, common yellow throats, stone sparrows, western kingbirds, yellow-breasted chats. So through these efforts, in terms of policy, landscape management, active restoration sites, we have been learning a lot in the Delta. We think that this regional approach, science-based, is really important for the success in the long term. We have a regulatory framework and public policies and the support from different stakeholders that already allows for meaningful restoration. Binational cooperation is essential and it's possible. No, I think that's the important message. Water allocation through different sources is feasible. You just need to find a way to make it work. We know that protection is feasible on a large scale in the Delta. And we have a very resilient ecosystem. No, we add water and it responds. So restoration is possible. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.